We want a regional ceasefire, right? We want Hezbollah to stop firing at our friends in Israel. We want Israelis to be able to live in peace. We've been, I think, very good at setting up what we're calling a deconfliction mechanism, but what it really is to say that when things happen, the sides are actually talking to one another.
Vice President J.D. Vance says Iran has agreed to let weapons inspectors into that country. But the major concession that Barak Ravid just told Kate that the U.S. made along the way.
The vice president was asked if Netanyahu had been kind of looped into all of this. And he said, yes, we've been talking to the Israelis and keeping them in the loop, as well as the Qataris, Emiratis. Like he says, everyone is being kept looped in because this is about the region. This is not a U.S. imposed deal, is what he says. But you also have Netanyahu just saying, I think it was just yesterday, that saying that Israel is going to stay in Lebanon for as long as it takes to protect Israelis. And Vance is clearly trying to downplay how serious these last kind of round of strikes and flare-ups have become in terms of threatening this overall deal. How central are you hearing that Lebanon, this fight between an Iran proxy, Hezbollah, and Israel has now become to the fate of the actual U.S. deal with Iran that will stick?
No, I think it has become a major hurdle for the deal. This was, in my opinion, one of the biggest mistakes in the negotiations to wrap those two issues together. It was an Iranian demand in order for Iran to have a say in what's going on in another sovereign country that is not Iran. This is Lebanon. And they wanted to have a say in order to make sure that their proxy, the terrorist organization Hezbollah, will survive. And they got it. And what they got yesterday is even more significant. At the end of the war in Lebanon in November 2024, the Biden administration negotiated a deal between Israel and the government of Lebanon that set a mechanism. This mechanism was the US, Israel, Lebanon, France, and the UN. And it was supposed to do deconfliction. Now, the Trump administration has created a new mechanism, but this time with the US, Iran, Lebanon, Pakistan, and Qatar. Israel is not part of this mechanism at all. And so I think that when Benjamin Netanyahu read this statement that came out last night from Switzerland, I think basically it blew his mind because this is a catastrophe for him and his government.
Barak, J.D. Vance saying that Iran has agreed to allow UN nuclear inspectors back in. Talk to me about what this means, how much of a win this is.
Well, first, this is part of a, let's call it, that's my description, a mini deal between Iran and the U.S. that I think both sides have been working on for several days now ahead of this first round of talks. What is this mini deal? The Iranians will agree to invite the IAEA inspectors back to the country, and the U.S. will start taking steps to release frozen assets, Iranian frozen assets in Qatar. What happened during the this round of talks? The Iranians said, we will invite them. Iran and Qatar signed some kind of document that approves a mechanism for use of those funds, those $6 billion in Qatar. This money hasn't been released yet, and I think it will be released once the Iranians actually allow those inspectors back in the country. So this is the whole, let's say, mini deal that was agreed on during this round of talks. And it's meaningful because IAEA inspectors did not visit the key nuclear facilities in Iran, the facilities that were attacked during the June 2025 war. They haven't visited there since then, more than a year now. So if they will, it will be a meaningful step.
That is so. As everyone's keeping track of Barak's great reporting, always they were working. The MOU is a framework to get to a deal, a path to get to a path to a deal, and now we're talking about a mini deal, which will now continue with technical negotiations to get to. We're continuing to follow this as Barak brings it to us at every step of the way. Colonel, one aspect that's becoming more and more central, it seems very clearly in the last few days, is Lebanon. And Vice President Vance described in some detail how he says they have now set up a deconfliction mechanism to prevent flare-ups between Hezbollah and Israel, flare-ups and incidents from spiraling and escalating kind of out of control. How could this or would this work? What do you hear in this kind of announcement?
Kate, one of the things that you hear is that this is basically going back to what was supposed to have happened in Lebanon multiple times. The UN had peacekeeping troops in Lebanon that were designed to basically deconflict between the Israelis and Hezbollah and of course, any other Lebanese elements that could possibly have been threatening to Israel. So in essence, we're going back to that kind of a state of affairs, possibly without direct UN involvement. It's not clear yet whether that the UN will be involved or not, but right now they're not involved. So what I hear is a mechanism whereby the Israelis and the Lebanese will be talking to each other. Okay, that's good. The problem is how much is Hezbollah involved in all of this? And the thing that we have to remember is that neither Israel nor Hezbollah nor the Lebanese are part of these negotiations. So this is a deal that is made by other people that hopefully will be followed, because it does have an impact on the greater Iran deal that the U.S. and Iran are working on. But it is a positive step as far as it goes. But the problem is it does not include the people that are actually going to be either doing the shooting or the deconflicting.
With us now, CNN national security analysts Alex Plitzis and Beth Sanner. And Alex, I want to start with you. If I'm not mistaken, there were weapons inspectors inside Iran as recently as a year or so ago. What's the significance of Iran now saying they can come back in immediately? This was mentioned in the Memorandum of Understanding.
So it's part of the overall, I guess, implementation of the MOU is how I'll put it. We still haven't gotten to the technical level details. So the inspectors coming back is good, obviously, because since the strikes, there hasn't really been anybody in place to see what the condition is on the ground. So having them come back is an important step. But overall, again, this is really just the high-level implementation portion without actually getting into the technical details of how we're going to solve some of the thorniest issues.
Beth, what have we seen so far in terms of leverage, and who seems to have more of it in these talks?
Well, I think that it was very interesting that President Trump came in with this threat of almost a threat to assassinate the group who was negotiating, saying that they may not make it back to their country if they didn't stop Hezbollah in Lebanon from initiating actions. And I think that this is so important in terms of this leverage, right? But then Vance had to walk it back. So, when you have leverage like that and you try to use it, but no one believes that you will actually follow through with it, then you don't really have leverage. Right. So I think that, when you look at what leverage we have, it's mainly about economics. Right. It's really about the dangling of the carrot, because the stick is almost completely irrelevant right now and not believable. And I want to make one additional point on this idea of inspectors. We can't forget that Iran is actually treaty obligated to have IAEA inspectors in Iran. So what we're asking them to do is literally, yes, fulfill the MOU, but that's nothing to do with the fact that they already are under that treaty obligation. So again, we're kind of getting concessions for things that they're supposed to already be doing.
Or are we getting concessions at all, Alex? Are we seeing Iran give anything they're not more than willing to give so far in these talks?
So far, there hasn't been anything of substance. To Beth's point, they were granted the oil waivers. Things are starting to flow there. But we haven't seen any movement in terms of the technical details, the main issues the president wanted, which is particularly along the nuclear file. Again, from what we're hearing that came out of day one of the talks, this was really what I would call the next level below the MOU. If the MOU was, hey, we've agreed to talk about these topics, what was set forth is a framework over 60 days for how they would get those done in a very tight timeline that would, quite frankly, be unprecedented. And then some deconfliction mechanisms for potential regional hotspots for conflict. But other than that, Iran hasn't agreed, it looks at this point, to major concessions of any kind.
On the one hand, talking is talking, which is good. I mean, you would rather have every side talking than not talking. There is another side of this, though, Beth, which is that the Iranians, they're good at talking. And the longer the talking goes on, it seems it benefits them. So when they go back, when these negotiators go back to Iran, how do you think they'll explain it to the higher ups there, and how will it be received?
Well, they've already put out some statements that, as Vice President Vance indicated, are slightly divergent from the U.S. understanding. For example, on the frozen assets, where the foreign minister of Iran has put out that there was this movement on the frozen assets, and the central bank governor of Iran said that they signed agreements about getting the frozen assets underway and transferred. So they are saying that this is all positive, that they're getting things, specifically the money, and they want the money. So there is some leverage there, but again, time is something that is probably more on Iran's side than our side, as we're really trying to get the Strait open. And as Alex said, this is all about getting the Strait open and then getting that money moving. So, and the mechanics for doing that. The Lebanon part we haven't talked about, but having this kind of board or group overseeing deconfliction is very important, because that is the thing that could spoil this quickly.
It can and has in the past, and every day it's a huge risk to all sides there. Alex Plissos, Beth Sander, great to see both of you. Thank you.